Today's conveyancing clients expect speed, clarity, and frequent updates. But tight margins and rising client expectations put pressure on conveyancing practices. With smart automation and clear workflows, Leap helps conveyancing teams spend less time on admin and more time supporting their clients. Learn more at leap.co.uk.
You're listening to the Today's Conveyancer podcast, the leading source of information for residential property lawyers in England and Wales. Don't forget to subscribe and sign up to our free newsletter at todaysconveyancer.co.uk. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter.
Hello, welcome along to the latest Today's Conveyancer podcast. It's a very special podcast today because we have Malcolm Smith, CEO of Groundsure, and Kat Shiers, Customer Engagement Director at Groundsure, celebrating 25 years in the business. Groundsure this year, 25 years old. A huge amount of change over that period, no doubt, some of which we'll kind of come on to, and of course we'll do a little bit of future gazing as well. Great to have you both on the discussion. Thanks so much for joining.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I always ask my guests to tell us a little bit about who they are and what they do, but I have to say, feels a little redundant with the two of you because you're both, synonymous really with Groundsure. Been long-standing members of the team as well, Malc.
Yes, obviously I've done many roles in the business, so I've been there for quite some time. Over 18 years, currently Chief Executive Officer, but I've apart from cleaning toilets and kitchens, I think I've done pretty much everything else. I don't know about Kat.
Yeah, I've done quite a lot as well. So I started as a GIS technician. For those of you that don't know what GIS is, it stands for Geographical Information Systems. It's basically like the program piece of software that all of our data is housed, so you can view historical maps where the property is, overlay data, all that sort of stuff. It's quite a shock that I got that job. I think I did one module of it in a degree for about 2 months and I really didn't know what I was doing, so it was definitely a gamble. But so did that for a little bit, became an environmental consultant. What else have I done? I'm now responsible for marketing and customer support and all of our training and things like that. So I've probably had about 7 or 8 different roles in the company over the last 14-ish years.
I said it's a milestone anniversary for the business this year. You've got your boat cruise again coming up in July. I think invites have landed in inboxes over the course of the last couple of weeks. What have you got planned to celebrate 25 years in property due diligence?
So we turned 25 on Monday the 2nd of March. On the same day, we launching a brand new marketing website. So that's been quite a big thing over the last 6 to 9 months. For our staff, we are doing a big party. So we've hired a venue in Brighton. All of the teams from Cornwall, all the remote workers, and everyone is getting together. So that's going to be a really nice celebration. But we're not just going to do things kind of in the month. We're going to pepper things throughout the year. So it's kind of like our 25th year. Obviously, it'll be great to celebrate with everyone at the BCAs on the 12th. So that'll be really lovely. But don't want to give too much away. Lots of little things will be happening.
Property due diligence has changed massively over the past sort of 25 years. You both have been with the business for a long time, as we said. What is the kind of key difference now compared to, Malcolm, you say you go back sort of 18 years. What's the key difference between Groundsure now than 18 years ago?
Well, it's significant, right? Even I still remember the stories joining Groundsure from some of the founders where they used to be in New England House in Brighton, and some of the staff would be waiting around for one of the directors to get a train down from London because all of the company's data assets were on his laptop to then interrogate and start creating reports.
Wow.
So obviously that's an IT nightmare now. So we're definitely not doing that, David, which is good. But it just gives you, the scale and size of the business back then. So a lot of the content, which there wasn't much, was practically held on a single laptop, whereas the business over time has evolved and obviously the content's improved, the accuracy's improved. And we've kind of been forced to do that, right? So when we're giving risk decisions for property transactions, be it residential or commercial, these are big decisions. They're important decisions, and they carry a lot of weight and risk, especially financially. So getting it right's critical. And that's why when it comes to Groundsure as a business now, obviously we don't have everything on a single laptop or server. You know, technology wise, the business is exceptionally robust. There's been a lot of investment in that. We put a lot of time and energy into security, cleaning, building, assessing content as well. And I think one of the biggest things for customers has always been accuracy, right? So if you look back 20 years ago, when people said things like, oh, it's property specific back then, you're not necessarily actually being truthful, because the data set that you're using might be having, I don't know, built in quadrants of say 50 meters, 100 meters, etc. So when you say property specific, it's actually not property specific. And I think over time now, with the large amount of investment through, you know, dare I say, Ordnance Survey and some of the data that we curate and produce, has ensured that when we actually provide due diligence, it is property specific. And we've actually changed as a business as well. You know, I always test my children, because obviously they have that unfortunate scenario of going to school and someone goes, so tell us, what does your daddy do for a living? And they used to turn around and say, oh no, he does environmental checks for when people buy houses, is kind of the obvious easier way to explain it to their, you know, the pupils in the school or the teachers. But now, you know, the kids turn around and have started realizing we're a content business. That's not just my children, but also everybody in the industry and the people at Groundsure. We're a content business. Everything we build, or from a product perspective, or capture or curate or whatever, is all born out of the content and data that we use. So we've definitely changed as a business over time, not only what we hold, the accuracy, but also the technology side of things as well, and also the processes and procedures we use to analyze and look at the content. Obviously there's elements of automation in most of these businesses, and where there's, you know, boring, mundane things that we know we can automate, we have automated, but that doesn't take away from the fact that we still have a lot of people in Groundsure, specifically environmental consultants, writing these searches and things for people. So, you know, AI isn't necessarily king within our business. We still have people that are actually putting a lot of time, energy and effort into not only making sure they're educated and understand what they need to do in their roles, and we invest in that, but also they put that into the products that they provide for us as well.
How much of that investment has been driven by you as an industry and you know, driving the information forward, and how much has that kind of been, I won't say foisted upon you, but how much of that has been driven by external kind of forces that say, look, we need to have much more accurate property-centric data. Quadrants of 50 square meters is no longer good enough?
I'd say it's no one thing. I think it's both internal pressures and external pressures. You know, obviously we're always going to strive to be as accurate as possible, and that's born out of the people that lead a lot of these departments that manage the content we hold. But also, I think, dare I say it, you know, consumers, if you have a look at what's happened with consumers over the last 20, 25 years, they're more inquisitive. They can self-source. They're very savvy with technology. You see them, you know, even the questions we have coming out of some of our customers, you kind of look at that and go, that's actually quite an educated question, very detailed, very knowledgeable. So dare I say it, our consumers and the customers we serve are actually forcing us to be as brilliant and as accurate as possible. And it's not just us anymore. So yeah, I would say it's definitely both internal and external. I don't know if Kat's got any views on that. Like she mentioned at the start, she works very closely with and manages the customer service department, which manages, dare I say it, thousands of calls and emails a day. I don't know if you've got anything to add to that, Kat?
I think, yeah, when I first started, consumers in particular would just sort of say, well, they would take what we were saying almost as gospel. Now I think there's so much more other information out there that they're starting to question it. Like Malcolm said, I think they're potentially becoming more like intelligent, and they're they're more demanding of companies like ours. And at the end of the day, they're making the biggest financial decision of their lives, aren't they? Like, we can't be using information that is accurate to 50 meters, 100 meters, whatever, because it just has absolutely no bearing on their property. So it's interesting how things have changed. I mean, historically, this wasn't happening when I was at Groundsure, but things were, we were reviewing paper maps. Now all of the historical maps are scanned in, and there's over 1 million of them sat on a server. I think things like the pandemic really forced businesses like Groundsure we were kind of doing it anyway, and it was a really good job that this had happened, but we can access any of our data, any of our systems, anything from anywhere in the world. But we kind of saw during the pandemic that, quite a lot of organisations struggled with that. And I'll call out maybe the land registry. They really struggled during the pandemic because nothing that they were doing was online. Like, people were still having to go into the office, and we were really fortunate that didn't happen. Everything was in the cloud. Everything was like accessible at our fingertips.
Say hello to Moneypenny. We're you when you can't be. Answering calls and qualifying leads, booking appointments, updating your case management system. We handle it all just like you would, with brilliant people, AI, or both. Visit moneypenny.co.uk today.
One of the things that conveyancers are coming up against is the use by their clients of AI to communicate with them. And we've written extensively on today's Conveyancer about AI generated complaints as well. You talk about consumers being much better informed. Is that something that you're seeing within the organisation as well, Kat?
I'm going to have to look at it in more detail
Not
to be like, right, that's definitely written by AI.
Not necessarily complaints, but a more informed, are people more informed because of AI?
Possibly. I just think there's more information out there, isn't there? People are more like savvy. They, everyone turns to the internet for absolutely everything. I've never really thought about it from an AI point of view. I wonder if people kind of put our reports into ChatGPT or another
they 100% do.
system and be like, tell me what this means and raise the questions. And I might try that.
see what
see what it comes up with.
I don't think, obviously I'm not going to sit here for 1 minute and say we don't get queries about our products and our services and some of the risks we assign to certain properties or transactions. We do get queries, and obviously I've seen some of them, and I don't think I've seen one that I would call out saying that it's specifically been generated by AI. I mean, there's definitely some education behind some of the questions I've seen that have been raised. And I think there has been some people that have actually gone and done their own due diligence to understand the mechanics and the detail of some of the things we put in our products. So I can't sit here and say that I've seen AI complaints come through based on my experience, but that's to say it doesn't mean it's not going to happen tomorrow. But there we go.
I think as well, environmental risks make it into the news a lot more than they probably used to. So climate change, obviously, hot topic. Flooding, 50 days of rain. Sinkholes, things like PFAS and, the Netflix documentary Toxic Town, which was all about contaminated land in Corby from the 80s, I think. I think things like that, those kinds of topics, there's so much more information about them now. So consumers are definitely more educated.
I mean, the internet is a wonderful resource, but of course it's full of all sorts of claptrap as well. One of the things you safeguard, Malcolm, is the quality of the data that you hold. How can you make sure, I don't know what the answer is to this, but how can you make sure that that's something that is really communicated both to the profession and to consumers, and by extension, how can the profession help in getting that message across?
I mean, as a business, obviously we're party and members of a number of regulators and associations to help drive not only an improvement to the sector, but also for consumers to ensure that they're protected when it comes to the conveyancing transactions. So, I think Groundsure definitely lead on the front foot when we get involved with some of these organizations to help drive, the right standards and the right behaviors. I mean, it's no secret that the conveyancing sector has been getting a bit of a rough time over the last few years around turnaround times when it comes to transactions. You know, several people have experienced it. I know I have. It does take a lot of time, energy, and effort to get transactions through, and that's definitely not resting on the conveyancer. It's not solely their fault. There's a lot of different mechanics and things that have to go on within a transaction, which doesn't help the overall timescales to the process. But one thing that we are seeing is where the industry is talking about, you know, solicitors being instructed when properties are listed, etc., and trying to trigger all of the admin tasks, dare I say it, or the data gathering far earlier in a transaction will help speed the process along. Yes, it will definitely aid it. I don't think it's the silver bullet, but what that also does is it allows a lot of other businesses to enter the industry, which is a good thing, right? You know, competition is definitely not a bad thing. It definitely keeps us going and pushes us. But also, one of the things that we're very conscious of is, as a business, quality of our content is critical. And what we don't want, obviously, specifically for the industry and the consumer, is people coming into the sector and going, oh, well, here's some content that I've scraped or I've gathered online. You can use this to go and rely on it in your transaction. So dare I say, I call it cutting corners. So one of the key things that, you know, leading the business and working with my leadership team at Groundsure is to make sure that all the time, energy and effort we've put in as a business and the sector's put in to ensure quality of content that's used in a transaction continues well into the future, no matter what point in the transaction that it's called upon. I think we need to make sure that we don't add extra complexity and challenge by cutting corners. So we'll continue to drive that theme and that message. And hopefully all those that we work very closely and collaboratively with will be doing the same thing.
You're alluding, I suspect, to digitisation of conveyancing, the future, what's going to happen over the course of the next 5 to 10 years. I mean, there's a question here about what it means for desktop-based PDF searches, environmental flood searches, isn't there? I mean, what do you see that future looks like for property due diligence?
Very good question. It's already changing. You know, Groundsure as a business quite some time ago ensured that, you know, every PDF product that we provide to our customers is also available digitally. So the actual answers and content within the products is available in a digital format, so that can be ingested and pushed into an environment to make the whole process and life easier for conveyancers when it comes to digesting this content, or dare I say it, presenting it to their customers. So that's been going on for many years, and that'll just continue. You know, it's kind of in our DNA now. If we build something new, we'll make sure it's available digitally. What we have seen is definitely a step change. I wouldn't necessarily say that digital step change has happened in the residential space, but we have seen quite a few commercial solicitors start taking advantage of visualizing the data and content when it comes to risk, either on an online platform with, you know, various layers that can switch on and off. And I think that's not just for them to benefit from when they're digesting what's going on the specific subject property or site, but I think it's also quite a useful tool for them to sit in front of their customers and demonstrate and show this content in real time and what's going on when they're presenting it to them. So giving them the tools to do that, I think, is quite important as well. And there's a lot of search companies that have and are investing in these capabilities. And what that means for Groundsure is, obviously, we're happy to have conversations by pushing our content into those environments if it helps the user experience for the consumer or customer, for those solicitors to demonstrate what they're looking at.
I mean, I'm never completely sure that people are fully aware of the breadth of products and services that Groundsure and other environmental search providers, property due diligence providers provide. I mean, it'd be useful probably just to frame some of the other industries and sectors that you work with, because I think it'd be a little bit naive of us to think that you make all of this investment purely for residential and commercial property searches.
Well, I guess to put it into context, we manage over 600 individual data sets. So every single one of those is sourced, QA'd, like rigorously checked. Even when it comes from like authoritative third parties like the Environment Agency, we don't just take data as gospel. We kind of do all of our own checks on it, and we do find errors in it, and we have to feed that back and get them to change it before we're willing to accept that information. We also manage over 1 million historical maps, which underpin a lot of our assessments, but some of the other markets that we work in. So we have a brand called Groundsure Insights. This is essentially uninterpreted data reports. So think of a conveyancing search, but completely uninterpreted. And it's essentially all of the data goes into it. And it's designed for environmental and geo professionals. So someone that is physically then going out on site, checking the site conditions, and then they're writing what is commonly known as a phase 1. They could be doing it for something else, like an environmental impact assessment, but it's normally when development works are happening. So it could be a massive housing estate or a new infrastructure project, something like that. But what we've developed over the last kind of 18 to 24 months is a whole new platform where a lot of that data can be visualized. So even before they purchase a product, they can visualize some of the risks. And this kind of helps them with things like quoting for their client. Then they'll kind of go through the process, buy the searches that they need, well, the data reports that they need. They are then delivered in PDF, but they can also be viewed in what's called Groundsure Explorer, which is essentially a whole online platform, and it's a digital version of the PDF. So all of the data can be viewed, it can be interacted with and interpreted. They can add tags and notes and all sorts of things and other bits. So when they go out on site, they might see something. So then they'll add a little label onto the Explorer platform to be like, I saw a tank here. As simple as that. And then everything can be exported out of it into their own products that they're producing on behalf of their client. So that is something else that we do. I guess from the searches side of things as well, that might not be as well known. So in 2020, Groundsure acquired Mining Searches UK, which is a mining reporting and investigation company based in the southwest in Cornwall. They've got over 40 years of experience in doing essentially site investigations and desktop mining searches, because obviously mining is a massive issue in Cornwall. So we also do a lot of that, and we've got a team of geologists who actually go out on site and do a lot of the investigations. So when a desktop report says there's a risk, they will go out on site and do some digging. They do trenching, drilling to essentially try and find a hole in the ground, is to put it as simply as that. So yeah, we don't just do desktops, we kind of do lots of the follow-on stuff as well. So I think that's a bit of a unknown fact about Groundsure, yeah.
Coming back to what we were talking about, PDFs or data, whatever, kind of however people might ingest the Groundsure content. I often think it's a little bit chicken and egg in terms of what the future might look like. I think about that sort of famous Henry Ford phrase. If you ask people what they wanted, they'd have said faster horses. And of course, he built the Model T car. What's the feedback from conveyancers about what they want from their searches, and how much do you have to account for that in terms of your future development, and actually think, no, do you know what? The future looks like this instead.
So obviously, customer voice is very critical at Groundsure. There's no idea that crosses our paths at senior level where, there's been a lot of answers and questions raised with customers to make sure that we're getting things right. I think we've got to be very cautious. There has been, since the introduction of climate change, there's been a lot of feedback, especially from conveyancers suggesting that, when are all these risks going to stop? How many more risks are we going to consider when it comes to property transactions? Right now, as I sit here, I don't necessarily see any more risks entering the party, shall I say. I think what we need to do is double down on how our reports and products or the data is presented. I think we will continue to drive to make sure the content is accurate as possible. And I think what we need to do is ensure that every single product or service we provide is available in any format or kind that customers require to ensure that it meets their workflows and their processes internally. Be it, there's a lot of companies that are collating a lot of the answers in detail and building their own property reports and things like that. I think as a business, we need to cater for that to ensure that we meet customer expectation, so that it makes the whole process and journey of them using the products easy and as simple as possible. So I don't think I'm going to sit here and say that, oh, we've got, a long list as long as my body, David, saying I'm going to introduce all these extra things to a transaction. I think that will just muddy the water. We don't. I think the risks that we cover today are everything that we need to cover. It's just what we use and how we present it. I think we can just continue on the journey to improve it every opportunity we get. That's not to say that Groundsure as a business is not going to obviously explore other opportunities, other revenue streams. Catherine mentioned a minute ago that we hold a lot of content and information that we serve in a raw format to multidisciplinaries for them to do their own due diligence. Groundsure as a business is exploring other ways of, dare I say it, sweating our databases, our assets, our content to serve other markets in those spaces. So I think we'll continue to support and strive to provide the best products in industry for the legal sector, but we are exploring other opportunities for other markets as well. Just, as Kat said, we've got 600 plus data sets we manage. I think there's a lot of benefit to a lot of industries from using that content in what they do day to day.
I realise this question is a bit like turkeys voting for Christmas, but I mean, you brought up climate and you brought up the fact that there's this huge amount of risk that conveyancers have to manage. You have empathy for them in trying to juggle all those balls?
Yeah, massively. I think that's why companies like Groundsure exist, right? So it might feel like, particularly with the whole climate change situation, it might feel like we're just adding more fuel to the fire, more things for them to check. But ultimately, that's our responsibility. The conveyancer can just pass that information on, and anyone can come and talk to us about those particular risks. I guess it's like money laundering. That's why there's tools available. So the risk isn't actually the conveyancer's risk, it's the company producing the searches or the service.
We're fast running out of time for the discussion, and I guess I just want to finish on thinking about the future. And Malcolm, you talked about upfront information and the importance of data integrity. With these new providers that are coming in, and with existing providers as well, and the requirement for information to be provided to consumers at the point at which they make this transactional decision, how much is too much information? And how much can you as a business afford to provide that information before it starts to become too expensive? You have to start, charging sizable amounts of money for it. And we've got through this whole conversation without mentioning HIPS, but there is a risk that this is going to be taken advantage of in the same way that HIPS was commercially.
A very good question when it comes to, how we present our answers. I think over the vast number of years that I've been with the business, I think there's been a lot of improvement in how we answer the risk questions we put in our products. When it comes to speaking to consumers, conveyancers, and anybody we work with, I think there's been a lot of good feedback on the basis of it's very clear, it's very succinct, it's very understandable. I think we get more questions when it comes to what we say if something isn't as they want it. Dare I say it's not the risk answer they're looking for. Then you start, getting different sorts of questions around the content, what was used, etc. So I think I'm not going to sit here and say we're bulletproof and we're perfect, but we've definitely worked really hard to make sure that the assessments and content we put in our reports is easily understandable by anybody that reads our products or uses them. When it comes to change in our sector, as I mentioned when we were talking about the evolution of Groundshure's products and services, we will always cater for whatever format, process, workflow we need to meet to make sure our products get into to serve our customers. And we even have a look at, things around notifications. So, for example, if you go to any search partner that we work with, they'll be able to tell you that we have built search alert functionality so that all they need to do is submit an address, and we will actually come back and qualify what certain risks need to be considered for that property. So dare I say, it's almost like a checker, if you want to call it, to give them a bit of an understanding of what's going on that location. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that that's property specific, because obviously that's the bit you pay for, right? You if you want to discharge liability and make sure that the risk on the property or transaction that you're purchasing is spot on, then the paid for data will be used in those transactions for assessments. So when you ask a question around, how are we going to manage that? I think the process we've got in place today already works. It's just, as I said earlier on, at what point in the transaction are we going to make it available? I don't think it's going to have a material change on price for the content. I don't think the content's value is going to be degraded in any way. I'm hoping that it actually adds value, not just to the businesses that do things properly, not like the HEPS days, which everybody can't forget, but also what we provide as a product and service to our customers, not just what we send them when they've ordered, but also the service, the pre and post service element at the back end of a transaction when they've got any questions, queries or challenges. We're there from start to finish. And that's one of the key things about Groundsure is we see the transaction through from start to finish, be it for the consumer or the conveyancer. And I think that's one of the testaments to the success of the business overall.
A really neat place to finish. Thank you very much indeed to you, Malcolm, and to you, Kat, as well. Groundshore's celebrations of 25 years in business continue throughout the year, and I'm told there's even a beefed up steroid version of the boat cruise this year as well. So great to have you both on the podcast. Thanks so much for joining.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The Today's Conveyancer podcast is available on your preferred podcast provider. It's also available on todaysconveyancer.co.uk. My thanks to Malcolm and to Kat. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you again soon.